I never thought bingo night would change my life, but when Jim's fingers brushed mine reaching for the same card, something electric shot through me. At 69, I thought those days were behind me, but the way he looked at me, like I was the only woman in that crowded community center, made my heart race faster than it had in years. His weathered hands lingered just a moment too long, and I felt a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the overheated room. "Lucky number," he whispered, his voice rough with something that made my breath catch. I should have pulled away, should have focused on the caller's voice, but instead I leaned closer, letting his presence wash over me like a tide I'd forgotten how to resist. The air between us crackled with possibility, thick with unspoken desires that made every casual touch feel deliberate, charged. When he shifted in his seat, his knee pressed against mine beneath the table, and I didn't move away. I couldn't. The sensation traveled up my spine like lightning, awakening parts of me I thought had gone dormant. His eyes never left my face as the numbers were called, watching every reaction, every flutter of my lashes, every unconscious bite of my lip. "B12, the caller announced, but all I could focus on was the way Jim's thumb traced slow circles on the back of my hand, sending shivers of anticipation through my entire body. If you're enjoying this unexpected turn, hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The bingo hall buzzed with its usual Friday night energy, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way the autumn air carried promises of change, or maybe it was simply time for something new to enter my carefully ordered world. I'd been coming to these weekly games for 3 years, ever since Harold passed, finding comfort in the routine, the familiar faces, the gentle competition that filled the empty hours. Tonight, though, as I settled into my usual spot with my lucky dauber and carefully arranged cards, I noticed him. Jim sat 2 tables over, silver hair catching the fluorescent light, laugh lines deepening as he joked with the woman beside him. He was new. I would have remembered that smile. The way it transformed his entire face made him look 10 years younger. When our eyes met across the room, something shifted in the air, a recognition that went deeper than simple attraction. It was magnetic, undeniable, the kind of connection that makes you believe in second chances. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Friday Night Bingo." Martha's voice boomed through the microphone, but I barely heard her. Jim was making his way through the tables, excusing himself politely as he navigated the crowded aisles, his destination clear. My pulse quickened with each step he took in my direction. "Mind if I sit here?" His voice was warm honey, seasoned with years of laughter and life. The chair beside me had been empty for months. No one bothered with the widow at table 7 anymore. But here he was, settling in like he belonged, arranging his cards with the methodical precision of a man who took his games seriously. "Jim Patterson," he said, extending a hand that was strong, calloused from honest work, warm in a way that made me want to hold on longer than propriety allowed. "Betty Morrison," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded when everything inside me felt suddenly unsteady. "Well, Betty Morrison, I have a feeling this is going to be a very interesting night." The first game began, numbers flowing in their familiar rhythm, but I found myself stealing glances at my companion instead of watching my cards. There was something magnetic about the way he moved, the careful attention he paid to each call, the small smile that played at the corners of his mouth when he marked a number. When he leaned closer to whisper, "You missed N32." His breath warmed my ear in a way that made concentration impossible. "I-19, Martha called, and Jim's hand covered mine as we both reached for the same spot on my card. The contact was electric, sending warmth racing up my arm and settling deep in my chest. Neither of us pulled away immediately, letting the moment stretch, testing the boundaries of this unexpected attraction. "Steady hands," he murmured, his thumb tracing along my knuckles before reluctantly withdrawing. "Good for more than just bingo, I imagine." The suggestion in his voice was subtle but unmistakable, and I felt color rise in my cheeks. At my age, I shouldn't be blushing like a schoolgirl, but something about Jim's presence made me feel young again, alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Game after game passed in a blur of stolen touches and meaningful glances. When he won, the third round, a modest $20 prize, he leaned over and whispered, "Lucky night. Want to help me celebrate after this wraps up?" I should have said no. Should have gathered my things and driven home to my empty house, my routine, my safe and predictable life. Instead, I heard myself saying, "I'd like that very much." The final numbers were called, winners celebrated, and slowly the community center emptied around us. Jim helped me gather my things, his hand warm on my elbow, as he guided me toward the door. "There's a little diner down the road," he said. "Nothing fancy, but they make decent coffee and the pie is legendary." "Sounds perfect," I replied, meaning it more than he could know. The October air was crisp as we walked to our cars, Jim's hand settling naturally on the small of my back, a gesture both protective and possessive that made my breath catch. "Follow me," he said, his eyes holding mine in the parking lot's dim light. "And Betty, don't lose your nerve." The diner was exactly as he'd described, a throwback to simpler times with red vinyl booths and a waitress who called everyone honey. We slid into a corner booth, the intimate lighting creating a cocoon around us that made the rest of the world fade away. "So," Jim said, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug, "tell me about Betty Morrison. What does a beautiful woman like you do when she's not dominating bingo halls?" Beautiful. The word hit me like a physical caress. When was the last time someone had called me beautiful? When had I last felt like anything more than an aging widow marking time? "I garden," I said, then laughed at how mundane it sounded. "I volunteer at the library, visit my sister in Des Moines once a month, and apparently I play bingo with mysterious strangers." Mysterious? His grin was wicked. "Lady, you haven't seen Mysterious yet?" Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. This was dangerous territory, this flirtation with a man I'd known for all of 3 hours. But danger, I was discovering, had its own intoxicating appeal. "What about you, Jim Patterson? What brings you to Riverside Community Center on a Friday night?" His expression grew more serious, vulnerable in a way that made me want to reach across the table and touch him. "Fresh start," he said simply. "Moved here 2 weeks ago from Chicago. Retirement wasn't sitting well with me there. Too many memories, too much time to think. Figured a small Iowa town might be just what I needed." "And is it?" His eyes met mine, intense and unwavering. "Ask me tomorrow morning." The suggestion hung between us, bold and unmistakable. My heart hammered against my ribs as I processed what he was offering, what I was being invited to consider. A night, an adventure, a chance to feel alive again. "Jim," I started, but he held up a hand. "Before you say anything, let me be clear about what I'm asking. I'm not looking for games or complications. I'm a 70-year-old man who finds you incredibly attractive and would very much like to spend more time with you tonight. If that interests you, say yes. If not, I'll pay for your coffee and drive you back to your car. No hard feelings." The honesty was refreshing, disarming. No pretense, no elaborate seduction. Just a straightforward proposition that respected both our ages and situations. "Yes," I said, the word emerging with surprising firmness. "Yes, I'd like that very much." His smile was radiant, transforming his features in a way that made my stomach flutter with anticipation. "My place or yours?" "Yours," I replied without hesitation. My house was too full of Harold's memory, too weighted with the past. Tonight was about moving forward, embracing the unexpected. The drive to Jim's apartment seemed to take forever, and no time at all. I followed his taillights through quiet streets, my hands gripping the steering wheel as anticipation built with each passing block. What was I doing? What would my sister think? What would the ladies at the library say? The questions faded as I pulled into his parking space, watching him emerge from his car with the easy confidence that had drawn me from the first moment. This was my choice, my moment, my chance to reclaim something I thought was lost forever. His apartment was neat, masculine, with just enough unpacked boxes to remind me he was still settling in. "Wine?" he offered, moving to a small bar cart by the window. "Please." I needed something to steady my nerves, to quiet the voice in my head that kept insisting this was madness. He poured 2 glasses of red wine, the action fluid and practiced. When he handed me mine, our fingers brushed again, that same electric current flowing between us. "To unexpected encounters," he said, raising his glass. "To second chances," I countered, and we drank, eyes locked over the rim of our glasses. The wine was smooth, warming, helping to ease the nervous energy that had been building since we left the diner. Jim settled beside me on the couch, not too close but near enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Tell me something about yourself that would surprise me," he said, his voice low and intimate in the softly lit room. I thought for a moment, wine loosening my tongue. "I used to be a dancer, nothing professional, just local productions, but for a few years in my 20s I performed all over Iowa. Harold always said I moved like poetry. Show me." The request was gentle but insistent, and something in his tone made refusal impossible. I stood, wine and memories combining to give me courage I didn't know I still possessed. In the soft lamplight of his living room, I began to move, letting muscle memory guide me through steps I hadn't performed in decades. Jim watched intently, his gaze appreciative but not predatory, honoring the gift I was offering. When I finished, returning to the couch slightly breathless, he reached for my hand. "Beautiful," he said simply. "Absolutely beautiful." The compliment washed over me like warm rain, awakening desires I'd thought were buried with my husband. When Jim leaned closer, his intention clear in his eyes, I didn't pull away. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question being asked and answered. Then I responded, my hands finding the back of his neck, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened, into something hungry and desperate and long overdue. Betty, he whispered against my lips, my name becoming a prayer, a promise. His hands found my waist, steady and sure, anchoring me to this moment, this choice. I pulled back slightly, studying his face in the dim light. This was the moment of decision, the point of no return. Behind me lay decades of propriety, of being the good widow, the responsible woman. Ahead lay the unknown, but also possibility. I want this, I said, the words emerging with surprising strength. I want you. His smile was tender, grateful. Are you sure? I'm 69 years old, Jim. I don't have time to be unsure about anything anymore. He stood, extending his hand in invitation. I took it without hesitation, letting him lead me toward the bedroom, toward whatever came next. The bedroom was simple, masculine, with clean lines and muted colors that spoke of a man comfortable with himself. Jim turned to face me in the soft light filtering through the curtains, his hands gentle on my shoulders. We'll go slow, he said. Everything at your pace. But slow was the last thing I wanted. I'd been slow for 3 years, careful and cautious and half alive. Tonight was about awakening, about reclaiming the passionate woman who'd been dormant too long. I reached for the buttons of his shirt, my fingers steady despite the trembling I felt inside. His breath caught as I explored the silver hair on his chest, the solid warmth of him beneath my palms. Age had marked us both, but there was beauty in the experience written on our skin, wisdom in the hands that knew how to give pleasure. His touch was reverent as he helped me from my dress, fingers tracing the curve of my shoulder, the line of my neck. Gorgeous, he murmured, and I believed him, felt beautiful under his appreciative gaze. We moved together toward the bed, hands exploring, relearning the geography of desire. His lips found the sensitive spot where my neck met my shoulder, drawing a sound from deep in my throat that I'd forgotten I could make. That's it, he whispered, his voice rough with want. Let me hear you. I'd been quiet for so long, contained, appropriate, but Jim's touch was breaking down barriers I'd built without realizing, freeing parts of myself I'd thought were lost forever. His hands mapped my body with patient thoroughness, finding places that made me gasp, made me arch toward him with growing urgency. When his mouth followed the path his hands had blazed, I thought I might dissolve entirely from the intensity of sensation. Jim, I breathed, his name becoming a plea, a demand. I needed more, needed him to understand that I wasn't fragile, wasn't going to break from passion. He seemed to hear the urgency in my voice, responding with increased intensity that matched my own growing desperation. This was what I'd been missing, what I'd forgotten I needed, this connection, this fire, this feeling of being utterly alive. When he rose above me, his eyes searching mine for permission, I pulled him down, answering with my body what words couldn't express. The joining was gentle at first, careful, but I urged him deeper, faster, communicating my needs without reservation. We found our rhythm together, bodies remembering what minds might have forgotten. The years fell away as we moved in ancient harmony, giving and taking in equal measure. I felt myself climbing towards something I'd thought was beyond reach, each moment building on the last. Let go, Jim whispered against my ear. I've got you. And I did, surrendering to sensation that crashed over me in waves, leaving me breathless and amazed. Jim followed moments later, my name on his lips as he found his own release. We lay together afterward, sweat cooling in the autumn air, hands still touching, reluctant to break the spell we'd woven. Jim traced lazy patterns on my shoulder, his breathing gradually returning to normal. Well, he said finally, laughter in his voice. That was definitely better than bingo. I laughed, feeling giddy and young and wonderfully alive. Much better, though I think I'll never look at daubers the same way again. Stay, he said, the request simple but weighted with meaning. Stay the night. I should have gone home, should have maintained some sense of propriety. Instead, I nestled closer to his warmth. I'd like that. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. I woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, to Jim's gentle touch on my shoulder. Breakfast, he offered, and I marveled at how natural this felt, how right. Over eggs and toast, we talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in a way that usually took months to develop. When my phone buzzed with a text from my friend Fran, I smiled. Everything okay? Jim asked. My friend wants to know how bingo went. She'll be shocked when I tell her I won the jackpot. His grin was wicked, satisfied. And did you win the jackpot? I looked at this man who'd awakened something I'd thought was lost forever, who'd reminded me that life still held surprises, that passion didn't have an expiration date. Oh, yes, I said, reaching across to take his hand. I definitely won. Some people think adventure ends at a certain age, but what if the best discoveries are still waiting? Have you ever found unexpected passion when you least expected it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone and love hearing your stories. And before you go, hit that like button, subscribe for more unexpected tales, and ring the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. Trust me, you won't. Want to miss what happens when ordinary nights turn extraordinary?